Hey guys, we're going to be jumping into in this video just talking about really the basics of getting starting a business. So, we're going to have some quick conversations just around some of the things that you should be thinking about, and then also some of our experiences in starting a business, some of the good things we did, and then also some of the things that we wish we wouldn't have done. So, we're going to keep this to a pretty short video, but we'll kind of jump into those things. Let's go, Jared. If you just kind of want to talk about maybe a couple of the things that you think are super important in starting a business, and then we'll jump over to Justin.
Yeah. It's very interesting because last 20 years, I've tried and failed and succeeded and back and forth with different businesses. And it's just very funny because I think one of the most important things that I can start out with is that, when you're starting a business and you're really um, passionate about something, make sure that the business that you create is something you can speak to. I see a lot of young guys trying to say, the one thing too is I see a lot of these young guys that want to get into real estate, right? But they don't have any understanding of real estate. They just saw their third cousin's friend start it and he sold his first house and he's sitting pretty and he jumps into it without doing any research and finding if it's the right fit for him. And I've done that too. I'm not blaming anyone for doing something that I haven't done. Okay. But I just think it's very important to really look at your strong suits, look at what you're passionate about, and start evaluating a direct need within the marketplace. Ask, is this something someone wants to buy? Can I speak to it and convince someone that there's something that they should be interested in? And that's, like I said, I failed so many times. I've tried to start so many businesses that I didn't even know what I was doing. And it's so funny that, I started out doing hair with my wife, and I did it for a means to make money. I didn't want to work for anybody. I knew I was not good at taking orders in my early 20s. And so I thought, well, how do I make money now? And it was very easy to do that. It was simple. I was self-employed. I could build it out, and we have built a few salons, and we have found so much success. And it's something that I bring in younger people into and show them the way because they have a passion of hair, right? I had a passion of being self-employed. And I learned all the little nuances and important things, and it became easy. So it's like playing like a game. You get through the first level, right? And you figure out all the little things. You get the second level, you figure out all the little things, and you just have to know. You have to know what you're talking about, right? You have to understand, what people want. And I think that's one of the very first things I want to talk about. It's just like stay true to who you are, and you'll find your way.
Definitely,
Yeah.
Justin. I know you have some experience building from ground to larger, right, larger business, right? But I guess starting off, what would you say is some of those key things that either went well or things where you're like, man, I wish we would have done that, you know?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is just to get started. That's the thing I see people. I talk to people all the time. They're like, "Well, I need to save up some money before I can start my business and all this stuff." So I just want to make it very clear: the number one person that should start a business is someone who already has a W-2. And the reason why, because you don't understand this yet, because you haven't started a business, you haven't gone through the tax cycle. Starting a business is essentially free because you're going to write off all of that startup cost against what the government is withholding in your W-2 anyways. So for you to not start a business is costing you money. So we got to think about the mindset flip here that gets people started. So your business loses money, it comes right out of the taxes that you were paying in your W-2. And whatever your plan for your business is, now you can start to write things off. Where your W-2, you earn that money, you pay taxes, and then you travel. Well, if you travel to an event and you've got a 1099 situation, LLC, you can be the solopreneur. You don't even need to know what your business is yet. But if you're going to do research to figure out what business you're going to start and it's for business purposes, now you have a free vacation. So I think that in itself should get you going in terms of why should I do this? How should I do this? And it's really not incredibly difficult. And the first time I did it, I thought starting a business was so much more than what it is. You go to LegalZoom.com. They'll do everything. It's step by step. You just go through the prompts. They set up your registered agent. Now you're overwhelmed, like all this stuff, right? You got your LLC. Then you just get a business bank account. They'll do your operating agreement for you. You get some business credit cards. You integrate it with QuickBooks. Now you've got a functioning business, and you can do your own taxes with TurboTax. Until things get complicated, it's really not that difficult to do this. So that's the first thing I want to say is just, if you need help with it, just go to LegalZoom.com, go through it. Now you have a business. It's literally that simple.
Yeah, I think so. I think the idea sometimes when you don't know something, right, it seems way harder because you're not educated on it, right? And then you go through that process and you're like, oh, that actually wasn't that hard. And in today's day and age with ChatGPT and Google, and like if you need to figure out how to get your EIN, right, it's very simple. You can just literally go on the IRS website and get your EIN. You don't have to pay anybody to do it. It's like a very simple process, right? But if you're willing to do a little bit of research on your own, you can figure out a lot of these things. And I think the one thing that I struggled with, and I think we've all talked about this on some level, is like sometimes it's just about a matter of like taking action, right? And so a lot of times you can sit and you could ruminate and you can say you have to figure out every single step of the way. That's how I am, right? I'm very like an operations systems type person. And so I want to figure out, well, if I do this, what's going to happen? If I do this, what's going to happen? And then what happens is I wind up going nowhere and it never gets off the ground, right? And so a lot of times it's like there's a lot of resources out there now, more so even when there was 10, 15, 20 years ago, to be able to do things like you can easily pop up a website for next to nothing. You can easily find a CRM for next to nothing. You can easily do a lot of these things. It's just a matter of, do you want to put the time and effort into and actually take action to do it? And like, there's a lot of times I didn't take action because I was worried about, I was in the wrong rooms, right? But then I was worried about like, oh, what are they going to think? Like, what if it fails? What if it like, just do it. See, if it fails, awesome. You learned a whole bunch. If it doesn't, then everybody that was, that you were worried about isn't going to care. You're not going to care about them anyways. So I think action is also like a huge, if you're passionate about something and you're able to take action on it and actually accomplish something every single day, you're going to move towards and learn through that whole process. So that's something I would say is super important.
Yeah. It's funny too, Drew and Justin, it's to kind of take the veil off entrepreneurship. It's just like any other job. You have to put the work in. And I remember my days in college, working at the Sports Authority, right? I didn't know how to stack shoes and put the UPC codes in, all that stuff, but you learn along the way, right?
Right.
It's the same kind of thing. I mean, especially those young individuals who have a great idea and they want to pursue it. It's like you are going to make mistakes, and you hope that you do. I think, Alex Ramosi says, and I want to make as many mistakes as possible as fast as I possibly can because I'm going to learn. It's the same thing.
Right.
You work at Taco Bell when you're 17. You put the cheese and the lettuce. Oh, I messed that up. You'll learn it again. You figure it out. It's a very simple thing. You just have to be okay and not get discouraged on top of it because it's not. Listen, entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. It's a hard thing. But if you just know that that's going to come with the territory, like anything, like relationships, with W-2 jobs, self-employed, that is part of the game. And you have to play it. You have to play the game, plain and simple.
Yeah. Also the time commitment. You have to get upfront with yourself on what it's going to take. Mm-hmm. So, if I'm just going off like all the people in my life that I love that just don't take action, that have excuses. It's always the same thing, like I have a job, like I don't have any more time. And it's just, yeah, well, so did I at one point. And when the 9 to 5 was done, from 5 to 9 to midnight, whatever, I was working on the other thing. So there's just no excuses. You got to pull that out. And if you don't want to allocate the time, if you don't want to miss weekends and work into the night, like then it's probably not for you.
No.
Yeah. I think that's a huge.
Oh, sorry about that.
Go ahead, Jerry.
I was just going to say, the great thing is too, you mentioned having a 9 to 5 at first, right? And I think if you already have a job currently, but you have a passion to have that freedom of entrepreneurship or the perceived freedom of entrepreneurship, I think that you're in a great spot. You have something that covers your costs. You have nothing to lose. You just your little bit of time. And if you're passionate about it, it doesn't matter you losing your time because you're going for a goal. It's the same thing as working out. It's like, you're wasting time in the gym. Yeah, but you're also getting better. right? And that's the part of it. If you're lucky enough to have a 9 to 5 and have a passion for something else, put in the work, make it happen.
Yeah, that's literally what I did. I
Yeah,
was using the money that I was making in 100% commission sales, knocking doors, to fund the business until I figured it out. And then,
it's
you know,
awesome. Yeah, that's
I've
incredible.
also done the opposite, right? Where like I've done that, right? Where you're working, you have consistent pay, things like that, and then you're working extra. And then it's the other option, which is I'm gonna jump off this cliff, right? Which is way more scary. And like at the end of the day, I think there's a lot you can learn from that situation as well. And everybody's situation is different, right? You may have a family, you may have people that are dependent on you. Like you're a single dude. At that point in time, you can take more risks, right? And so I think that there's, depending on the situation. Now I don't fully recommend that, because I guess I shouldn't say I don't recommend it. I learned a lot about myself in that in that period of time. But I mean, there's multiple ways you can go about it. And the other thing too that Jerry and I talked about actually earlier today is making sure. So one of the things I used to do is I used to talk about my ideas with everybody, right? I would come up with an idea and I'm like, I was excited about it and I just wanted somebody to talk to about it. And this is the realization of like, what room are you in, right? And so when I would bring ideas to people and they would just pick it apart, I would get demoralized. Like, oh, maybe this isn't as good of an idea. What I realized is like they just didn't have that same vision that I had, and saw something that I was able to see that maybe they weren't, right? And then I think back, like how many times did I stop taking action because I shared something with somebody that had a 9 to 5 mindset, and that's all they were ever going to be, which is totally fine, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But I was in my headspace was in such a different place, and I took that as almost gospel. Like, well, if they think it's a bad idea, like they're a smart person, maybe I shouldn't do this. And then I kind of, go back to whatever I was doing. So I think sometimes when you have a really good idea, keep it tight to the vest. And if you have people around you that have gone through it before, I don't think there's ever an entrepreneur that's going to, somebody that's already gone through it and you take them an idea, they might give you some constructive criticism, right? But at the end of the day, they're probably going to be the people that are like, go for it. So that's something that I would just be aware of, is like, be careful who you're talking about things to. Sometimes like build it and then people start to see what you're building, because sometimes people aren't going to have the same vision. I can guarantee they're not going to have the same vision as you for what you're trying to build, and their opinion doesn't really matter, And I don't know. That's something that I would just be very careful of when you're starting anything at all.
that's super strong, because more dreams are killed by friends and family than anything
Yeah.
else. And it's
Big
not just
time.
when you're starting. This is I'll tell you a quick story, because this happened to me later on in the journey. We were exiting a business and I almost screwed it up because I was talking to my mother. Yeah. So I'll never forget this. I was selling a business. I've never done it before. And I'm like, I think I should get a second opinion, get some private equity coaching. And it was going to be 15 grand to get 15 minutes of this guy's time, who's sold, like nine-figure companies, right? Which sounded crazy. And so I paid the money. My mom just happened to call me. I told her what I just did. And then she starts sending me articles and stuff from the internet about how this guy's a fraud, a scam. And I was like second guessing myself. I'm like, oh, I think I really screwed up. Like, because that was a lot of money for me at the time. Anyways, that creeping in almost made me cancel and ask for a refund. And that guy renegotiated my deal and made me $750,000 more than I was going to get. So
Well,
very
and that
important to not talk to people. And I wasn't even asking for advice. I was just sharing because I just wanted to talk.
Yeah.
right. And a lot of times too, in that scenario, right? I think you said it was your mom. It cut
Yeah, I
out,
love you,
right?
Mom.
But what I will say is, like, at the end of the day, in that situation, all your mom is like, she's only caring about you, right? And in her mind, she's just saying, I want to make sure Justin's okay. So what can I do to like make sure he's okay, right?
Yeah.
So it's not bad on mom, right? It's just in the people you care about, you want to make sure that they're okay. But a lot of times it's like Your mom doesn't have all of the experience that you have. So if you're going to ask for advice on specific things, try and seek out somebody maybe that has fully been there before and said, hey, go into this meeting, spend the money, then figure out here are some red flags to look for. That probably would have been more solid advice, right? Than the internet. So it's just a lot of times it's like you can't blame those people for giving their advice, because a lot of times if you're sharing with the people that are closest to you, they just care about you and they want to make sure you're okay. So it's not detriment to them. It's just making sure that you're just being secure with what information you're sharing and at what level, right, that person is at, more or less. Have they gone through it before? But
You know what's funny is actually I have a quite similar story, Justin. My mom, she's my biggest critic, right? And so I literally have rinsed and repeated so many different business ventures, and I actually know that if I'm feeling stuck, I purposely call her and I ask her, I'm like, hey, I'm doing this. What do you think? And I know that she's going to try to keep me in this really safe zone. And so what I do is I let her get me in this safe zone. So I start creating, I'm such a sick individual. I start creating this, like, she doesn't believe in me kind of thing. She never saw it in me. From birth, she knew I wasn't good enough, right? And I use it because for the first
some
20
Michael Jordan
businesses I
stuff
tried to
going
start
on right there.
and succeeded and failed. I know exactly what I'm going to get from her. I know 100% she is going to doubt me in my mind. So I purposely go
Right.
to her if I'm feeling like I got writer's block and I can't really get things going. I go to her because she's going to give me that I'll prove you wrong kind of thing. And I just, it's once you do it enough times and you know how to expect certain things out of certain people, you got to use them to your advantage. Right?
Right. That's awesome. Yeah.
I may have some problems. I don't know.
No,
No,
I
that's
think every
people being able to turn things into fuel.
Yeah, 100%,
big
100%.
time.
But listen, and I'm not saying like it was hard. There was years where I was like, she doubts me 100%, and I just changed the way I looked at it. You know, I used it to my advantage. I think that was a good vessel for me to utilize the strength I needed to get through the rough patch or the writer's block or the mindset shift I needed, and it just it worked out well. But it took a lot of years to kind of get to that point. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
I think really from a standpoint too, I think we'll wrap up here in about 5-10 minutes, but I think I'd love to hear from you guys too. We can talk a little bit about maybe some more technical things that people should think about from a business standpoint. I think there's a lot of people out there that are saying you got to have a business plan, you got to have all these things before you can get started, right? And so I think hearing from you guys, and I can chip in here, but Justin, what are some like more technical things? I think we've talked about the emotional side a little bit,
Yeah.
but I think from a technical standpoint, what are some things that guys should be thinking about? Hey, I'm going to start this business. What are 3-4 things that you should have, and then maybe some things that are not fully necessary?
Yeah, I think you got to be careful of going into a business just because you love it. So being able to separate, okay, I love this thing, it's my passion, but do the margins pencil? Will it work? Are people in the market for my product? You'll spin your wheels for years trying to make something work that even the most talented entrepreneurs couldn't make work. So I think being very objective on the way in about the viability of the business and what you want to do is the most important thing. Looking at the whole client journey, the whole supply chain of what you're doing, and making sure that at each point there's no break points that will ruin the scalability of what you're trying to build. So and don't be scared of those roadblocks. It's like, okay, cool, that doesn't work. Let's figure out another way, or we need to go to a different product. But make sure that it's going to be hard enough, no matter what. So make sure there's no sticking points that just make the business not viable.
yeah. I think really, and probably one of the most important things too, especially if you're going to have a business that requires some help, some employees. We all want to bring the people around us, friends, family, in with what we're believing, right? And I think we get ourselves in trouble because there's going to be hard conversations when you have an employee, and especially when you're first starting a business out. And you need to be able to have those kind of hard conversations. And if you do want to bring a friend or family in because you know they have some intrinsic qualities that could really benefit what your vision is, and you think they're going to be at bat for you, be careful, because it's so much easier to work with someone who has the skill set that you're looking for, and you can have those hard conversations. Because it's I see a lot of businesses and a lot of people, and I've done it myself, where I bring like a family member, a cousin, a sibling in, and you get caught with 3 to 6 months of like the job not getting really done, and they're not trying to take advantage of you, but it kind of ends up playing out to be like that because it's my sister, it's my cousin. I have a little more leeway, and you have to be very careful with that, because if you, especially when you're first starting out, the people you put around you are going to be instrumental into your success. And so make sure you if you need to turn the tide and change something with a employee that you're working with, you got to be able to have that conversation right then and there, or you're going to waste time. And
Yeah.
especially when you're first starting out, as you know, you don't have leeway to waste time. You got to get going, right? So it just be very important, the people you put around you that are going to help as employees to bring your business up.
Yeah, I want to add to that because I had to learn this just the hard way, like most of us do. But
Mhm.
the only thing you can manage is KPIs. You can't manage people. And if you don't make those expectations very clear up front, it's going to be very difficult for you personality wise, to deal with different personalities and manage them. So you have to completely take the emotion out in the hiring process or the partnering process, whatever. Say, these are the expectations. Are we clear? And like you manage it before it even starts and saying, this is what it's going to happen if you don't do this. Like, it won't be on me. Like, the company's going to let you go if it's very clear. So figure out what it is. Is it a number of calls? Is it a revenue number? Is it whatever it is? But don't go into operating or any action until, without very clear KPIs and expectations for everyone involved.
And I think too. So what you guys are talking about, when I was an employee in this business, but it was my first. I was employee number 2, and I was really brought on to like grow everything, right? And so I made a lot of mistakes with hiring people and like how do I set expectations and how do I do those things, right? And one of the things that I did, because I realized I'm trying to have really tough conversations, but then I took a step back and I was like, okay, well, how is this on me, right? As like the leader, like what am I doing that's not setting the proper expectations? And so a lot of times what I do now with anybody, even if I'm helping hire for like one of my clients now, there's a whatever the legal document is, if you're a 1099, a W-2, whatever you're signing from an employee standpoint, and then I literally create a separate document and I break down all of the expectations and everything that we're going to offer them, right? So if you're hiring a salespeople, what are all of the resources that you're offering that person, right? What are your expectations? And then what are you doing every 30, 60, 90 days to stay on top of that? And a lot of times what I would get to is I'd get to a point where at 30 days, I'd go through and I'd say, okay, you initialed every single one of these, right? So this was very clear up front. What do we need to do in the next 30 days to change that? And then we're going to reevaluate. And then when it got to 60 days, it was like, okay, you're either going to fire yourself because I'm not going to fire you because the expectations are so clear and upfront that I'm not even going to have the conversation. I'm going to schedule this meeting in 90 days. And if you haven't done what you've literally written and initialed that you said you're going to do, just don't show up. Right now, that's extreme. But what I'm saying is like you setting the expectations up front is going to give you a positive feedback loop with that individual. And so you're going to be able to tell very quickly, is this person working out or no, right? And so it also gives you the opportunity to make decisions at a quicker pace, right? Like Jared was saying, because when you're in a startup, like every dollar counts, time counts, and all of that. So I took it to the farthest extreme to where I was like, I'm never going to fire anybody because I'm going to create such clear expectations and we're going to be on the same page the whole way that by day 90, you're going to fire yourself. Like I'm not going to put myself in a position to have to feel bad because you weren't doing it. Now, if I didn't set those expectations and I come to fire you, I personally would feel bad about it because it was my responsibility as your leader. So I took it way far because I hated like firing people is the worst thing in the world, right? And so I realized like people fire themselves as long as I'm doing everything in my power to make them successful. And so I think as a leader of a business, that is imperative, right? You can't just hire people and expect them to be who you are. Like, because if they were who you were, they'd be starting their own business and going through the same thing. So that's the other aspect that I think is super important. Don't expect somebody to be your twin. It just won't happen. So
100%, man. Hey, quick question, Drew. How long did it take you to have those guidelines in place and those certain KPIs? How many mistakes did you have to make?
more than I'd like to admit. I think a lot of times you when you're somebody that, like, I would say genuinely cares about people that you're working with, right? You're hiring people, you understand that firing somebody is going to be like the worst day of their life, right? For a lot of people. Trying to take the emotion out of that. And to be honest with you, I think I created it more to avoid having to feel like a shitty person. If I'm being very honest, because like I genuinely care about people, especially if I'm the one hiring them. They're my responsibility. And then I started to realize like I'm not giving them what they deserve to be successful. So I literally built it to a point where I was like, I'm going to hire them. I'm going to give them support, training, every advantage that I possibly can give them within the confines of this business. And then at that point in time, if they're not up to, if they just don't get it, or like they're just not doing what I need them to do, then I stopped feeling bad because I was, in my mind, I guess, I was doing everything in my power to make sure that person was successful. So I think it was the avoidance of not wanting to feel like a shitty person, to be honest, right? And so, but I realized like, man, this is really powerful because now they can take ownership of it, and I don't have to feel like an asshole, right?
That is 100% it, right? Because the way I used to let people go, it was like when you break up with a girl and you're like, hey, look, it's me, it's not you.
I know.
Because I felt terrible. That's like the worst way. But if you do have those KPIs, it's very simple. It said, hey, remember when we agreed that we were going to do this many calls, we were going to do this? We didn't have, and it didn't happen, right? So we got to go a different direction. Love you as a human being, but this isn't going to work out for the business.
Yeah. And like I said, I literally went to the extreme of like breaking everything out and having them initial every single section and then signing it, because I would just bring that every time that we talked. You sign this, right? So either take responsibility for it, and like I said, it was the avoidance of not wanting to be the person that was ruining their day. Like, you know what I mean? So yeah, now you guys are bringing flashbacks back of like some of these conversations that I had to have.
But you learn from it, right?
Oh yeah. But it's been something that I do religiously now, because it just is something that is very powerful, and it helps you make decisions much quicker than, man, I really like this person, I'm just going to keep them around for another month and another month and another month. And before you know it, they're farther away from hitting any goals. And then now you're getting pissed because you're resentful. And then that situation doesn't work either. You know what I mean? So what can you do as a leader of a business or an owner of a business up front to avoid those type of situations? So do you guys got any other topics? We'll wrap up here in shortly, but if there's anything you want to kind of end with that you think is important, we'll do those quick, and then we'll wrap up the call.
No, I think great intro to business in terms of just mindset and getting around, getting started, and some valuable tips to learn from our mistakes on the way in.
We'll have plenty more of these, I'm sure. So
yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, thanks guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. See you guys soon.